I want to talk to you today about self-belief and how we leave our little girl in the past hurting and not understanding certain situations that create certain beliefs later on in adulthood. So it could be that little boy inside of you or that little girl. I want to tell you a story about when I was 12, and I grew up in the Philippines and we moved to New Zealand when I was 10. So a couple of years later, I decided to join a springboard diving team in Wellington. And I love the idea of jumping off a board and doing somersaults and all that, but I've never really had any strong training in swimming or any gymnastics or anything like that. And so it was exciting for a while. We had a coach, and during practice you'd have to be doing these stretches and pikes and tucks, jumping off the board, and it did a lot for my confidence because I wasn't really feeling that safe in deep water then. So it got to the point where I was ready to have my first competition, and I was really nervous. And what happens is you do certain dives, so you do 4 dives, you do maybe a straight jump in the water, depending on the entry of difficulty. Mine was like the beginner's level, and so I did like a forward dive, and then you stand on the board and you do a backward dive, and then I did another dive. But basically, out of 8 children, I came last in that competition. I was gutted. I was just devastated. I didn't know what that meant, actually. I was really probably one of the lowest points in my childhood where I felt like I'd failed. Even though my parents said, "Oh, you did an awesome job. That was a really good meet." And it just didn't cut it for me. I pondered a lot about that and thought about quitting. And eventually I did quit because I wasn't good enough. I've carried that story of not being good enough. And I tried a lot of things in my high school years and sports like badminton, and I love sports. And I never really achieved a high enough status for me to be in any national team or regional team. And that was okay, I just quit. It was just something that I thought it was fun for a while, but when it got tough and I had to really challenge myself, I thought, I'm finished, I'm done. So that came back to me today because I'm now onto something in my life where quitting isn't going to be an option for me, and I am bringing all of my past experience with life to know that I'm going to make it through and be successful in this business venture that I'm committed to. And so these little selves come back to me, these little selves of mine, the little girls that didn't feel validated, didn't feel worthy, didn't feel that they were good enough. They were coming up and have been coming up for me these last few months. And so I look at them and I say to them, you had to experience that, and I know that you might have felt humiliated by that experience, but know that you matter, know that you count, know that you are good enough, and no amount of competition, coming last or coming first, is ever going to define who you are. And I know that now as an adult, but my little girl, my 12-year-old, didn't know that. That it was very brave, and she was just really determined to keep going to these trainings, even though she didn't feel like she was the best, and she didn't do the best pikes or the best dives, and she was really scared of the water ultimately, but she still went. And that's resilience. And so I thank her for the learning, and I thank her for making me the person that I am today, that I can say the external doesn't define who I am, and I am good enough.